Anyone who has the first question?
Hi, I'm Brent Rinaldi. I really enjoyed all three talks, Almaz, you invited me to comment, so well, thank you. It's first of all, it's always gratifying when one writes something and to know that somebody has read it and found it useful. So thank you for that. I think that just a quick comment. I'm not a political strategist myself. I'm a historian, so I don't know if you put too much weight on what I say, but I think when you're looking back at the Townsend movement, you're thinking about basic income now, there are certainly, so what I'm saying is I don't have answers, but I think there are a couple of questions that, looking back at the Townsend movement and other historical precedents raises. One is an issue that was raised during the talk last night. Do we talk about let's have basic income, or do we say let's have basic income and here's a specific way that we can feasibly pay for it? I think those are two distinct approaches, and they have their they each have their disadvantages and their advantages, perhaps. And the other is the one where the other question is this a left issue, or is this something that should be pursued as a bipartisan issue? And I'm conflicted about that. I think that it's very easy if basic income is pursued as a left issue that's just going to be one more stalemated issue. And if you look at climate change could be a bipartisan issue. In every other country in the world, practically, it's a consensus issue. And just the way things happen to fall out in this country, where Al Gore made it his personal mission without inviting a champion on the other side to do it along with him, and where the fossil fuel industry co-opted the Republican Party on the issue. Now we've been stalemated on climate change, and maybe things have worked out differently. It would be a bipartisan issue. At the same time,
But what's your question? We don't have that much time, so.
Okay, well, I'll leave it there.
Do you want to collect a few questions first, or do?
Yeah, we might as well do that because we're kind of short on time. So does anyone else have questions? There was another hand up here, Victor.
Yeah.
And you can also ask questions to each other if you want.
Yeah, so this question is for Almaz. You had spoken about matching assertiveness to the political context. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that, what exactly that means on practical terms.
Is there anyone else? Just start with those two.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. And Brent, I should say I'm not a historian, so I want to make it clear I may have gotten some of the details wrong, but I take the stories and try to learn what I can from them. These two questions are: should we be advocating a basic income in general or a specific basic income proposal? I think the answer is both. And I think one of the things that we've done in these two networks has been talking about basic income in general enough that now it's actually it's not quite as I think in the technical term on the political agenda. It's not being debated in Congress yet or anything like that. But it's getting close. And I think as we get close to it actually being on the political agenda, then we do need to switch our tactics. And people will say, okay, how would it work? What does it actually mean? And then I think we have to be very specific about what it actually does mean. But I think we need both tracks going at the same time. And then this question of whether it's a better strategy for basic income to be associated with the left or as a bipartisan issue, I think I would say again the same thing. Both. We need to be both. What I was really commenting on was the specific political tactic of the Townsend movement of getting politicians to sign on to their proposal and then working hard to defeat anyone who opposed it, or to elect people who supported it, even if the people they were, for example, helping to elect to support their particular proposal were against the rest of the progressive agenda. And I think that hurt them politically with the Roosevelt administration and with members of Congress as well. So that's very politically a very tactical question was the one that I was addressing. I think actually climate change is a very good example. I think climate change started out as a left issue and now has become a mainstream issue. And I think that people have been careful not to frame it specifically politically as tied to one party or the other, but really as benefiting all of us. And I have to say one of the most hopeful things that's happened to me since November of 2016 is the completely sort of bipartisan response against President Trump and his withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. I never thought that I would be standing alongside the CEO of Exxon on any issue related to climate change, and yet here we are. So I think that's also an example of where things can move into a bipartisan consensus, even if it starts out being more aligned with one party. And then in terms of matching assertiveness to political context, in the two examples that I was looking at of these social movements, the Townsend movement really had quite significant political strength in the fact that it did have these clubs that were very active in particular congressional districts. And so if a congressman was opposed to the Townsend plan, they could really activate their members to write to him, to visit him, to tell them that they would oppose them in the next election if they did not support the movement. The National Welfare Rights Organization, on the other hand, was a much smaller movement. I think at its peak it had about 25,000 members as opposed to 2 million in the Townsend movement in the 30s, when the population was a lot smaller than it was in the 1960s. So they really couldn't back up the threats that they were making. So that's the question is, if you're going to make threats, and they were threatening to politicians, to members of the administration, they didn't have the support of a large movements in either in particular localities, in particular congressional districts, or broad-based either. So they couldn't really carry out that threat. So that was that point.
Other questions? Yeah? So I think we'll see it first and then.
On the NWRO, I understand it was the death, and perhaps the very suspicious death, of the Syracuse University chemistry professor, black professor, who then took on the helm of NWRO. And from what I understand, his death was a little suspicious, like with Martin Luther King, so that may have killed the movement. On the Townsend movement, more important, in the 30s, there was a group called Technocracy. Technocracy, which had a brief period of intense publicity in 32, 33, and I met the head of it in 69 before he died, is that they advocated basically paying machines, setting up a whole new system, advocating a 20-hour work week, and basically moving to something called an energy certificate. It was a totally different direction. No one in the academic community has ever done a comprehensive analysis to try to update and move in that direction. And that's part of the problem of people who are in political science. You're still stuck with the simplified notion of the guaranteed income. There are some other paradigms that are consistent with it, but go beyond it. So just share those comments.
I just realized the end of Jason's presentation was a little rushed, and I was actually pretty interested in knowing a little bit more about what the dynamic was between your old opening line and your new opening line. If you could go into that a little bit more and what that's like on the couch.
All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. That's all. So. Yeah, I just wanted to thank all of you for really amazing presentations. I really love them. Just one thing, like on Jason on the movement thing. What we've been doing in the UK, which I think we've had some success with, is we've been moving kind of from sector to sector. So rather than from movement to movement, so we've been concentrating, say, like the last couple of years, we've been concentrating on trade unions. And like this year, we're moving on to churches, okay? And yeah, so we're kind of trying to, and then we'll probably go on to like education. And we've made a whole list of different sectors of society rather than trying to sort of focus on particular movements. Yeah, so it's just, it's just a kind of strategic or tactical thing. But, but because the sectors tend to be quite broad-based politically, that it's, yeah. Anyway, so that's what we're experimenting with, and we'll try to update people as we go.
There's a lot I like about that. There's a lot I like about that because you're sort of learning a language. Because often with basic income, knowing how to lead can be difficult because that first movie they have in their head can determine whether or not they support it or not. So the first image you have in your head is strike fund for all, right? I'm less likely to use that piece if I'm speaking to I never have spoken to the Chamber of Commerce, but I wouldn't open the strike fund.
Oh yeah, that's actually the next thing we're doing is in Birmingham, we'll be speaking to the Chamber of Commerce. So, yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, so as far as the two moves on the couch, I really love the way basic income works as an idea, which I think you're showing us, right? It's an idea not attached to a project, not attached to a proposal. It gets people to think about what they're doing, right? And that's one reason I love this movement is I know if we end up, whatever happens, I'm gonna get a lot of people to think about what they're up to. It seems like the Swiss movement really leaned real hard on that. What would you do if your income was guaranteed? Enno Schmidt really, spiritually just thinks that's a good question for everyone to ask. But I do think that opening, sometimes it worked for me well in class. Instead of this old model where somebody decides whether or not you deserve a welfare provision, right? Do you deserve it? Are you still seeking work? Did you quit your job? We're paying people quite a bit to vet who gets that and who doesn't. Let's just stop doing that and issue a share to everyone. And I love the way it works in class because teaching political material in class can get kind of boring. People just repeat the Facebook slides of whatever kind of side they like, right? They kind of sound like CNN or something. CNN, Fox kind of repeat those slides. This breaks it up. Conservatives say, oh, that's not bureaucratic, but it seems to do something good, right? And some of them will like it. Liberals will say, oh no, I don't know what they'll, if they're addicted, they'll just spend it on. You'll get every response, right? It at least breaks it into 4 new perspectives, and that's good for me. But that opening where, it's true, this policy is different from other welfare policies where somebody decides whether you fit or not. It's just a share issue to everyone. That's true, but as that opening, it implies far too strongly we're going to replace all this other stuff, for one thing. And we're having trouble now controlling that message. Very good people are saying no, right? We're starting now to see, I monitor a lot of internet discussion of basic income. I do the Facebook page for USBIG and Basic Income Earth Network, and we're starting to see that wave of glib left blogs that say, it'll still be capitalism. And it's Silicon Valley neoliberals blot. That's the other one. Right? And I'll write and go, man, I wish I could get a piece of it. Personally, I just want you to know I'm not involved in a neoliberal Silicon
One minute.
Valley blot. Gotcha, go. So that second movement where we say, look, I can see that nobody had you in mind. I can see that you've been ignored and despised. We know this. This policy will break that, right? You will be able to do things you could not do before. Your town, Ware, Massachusetts. Nobody's got a plan for Ware in Boston. Nobody's got a plan for that town in DC. The check will still cash though, right? We can get past all of this. So we can be just as mad as they are and still make this a sensible proposal. That I think is the strength there. Word for word, I may not have had the language there, right? But I think it's a different opening, right?
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there. Ken, did you want a minute to say anything or reply to any of the questions?
No, I mean, we can talk about Pixar movies during break and stuff.
Okay, that sounds good.
I'm going to talk to you.
Okay, so that concludes this session. I assume that there's coffee during the break where you got it originally, and the next 2 sessions will recommence. There'll be one here and then another one up in the auditorium at 10:40, so you can check your schedules for the details on those.